History always smugly records that Antarctica was merely a dead ice block drowned in anonymity until the 19th century. But how on earth did a map from 1513 manage to accurately draw the ice-free coastline of this land, delivering a thunderous slap to the faces of know-it-all scholars? Who took a leisurely stroll in Earth's freezer before humanity even had time to name it? People still love to lull you to sleep with the tragic tale of Friday the 13th, 1307, when the King of France and the Pope cheered as they roasted the Knights Templar on the pyre. A happy ending that cleared the path for those craving ultimate power, right? But oh, how naive. While the hypocrites were busy enjoying that bloody execution spectacle, the real power of the Templars, their entire massive fleet at La Rochelle and a hoard of forbidden ancient knowledge, had quietly evaporated into the night. They didn't flee like cowardly rats. They set sail according to heretical maps beyond the edge of the known world, aiming straight for the Southern Cross constellation. Did these red-crossed warriors turn Antarctica into a great vault, burying a truth that could reshape all of civilization? What actually happened behind the velvet curtain of history's bloodiest purges? Put on an extra coat, because the truths we are about to dig up today will be bone-chilling. Welcome to Dark History. I am Zorro. And tonight, we sail to the very end of the lies. The Antarctic wind doesn't just blow, my friends. It howls. It howls like a massive, starving beast, waiting to tear apart any fool brave enough to step into its domain. Now, close your eyes. Imagine you are in the cramped cockpit of a reconnaissance plane in the winter of 1949. Outside, the frozen glass is a white void, desolate and deadly. The ice below stretches endlessly, creating a kingdom of silence and shadows where the very concept of life seems like a ridiculous joke. And then something flashes. Right in the middle of that absolute wilderness, a dark shape rises faintly through the thick snow. Your goggles fog up from your frantic breathing. You tilt the plane's wings, trying to catch a clearer image. It's not a random rock. It's angular. It's calculated. It's an unnatural geometric structure sitting where no human hand should have ever been able to reach. But before your excitement can even take shape, an aggressive snowstorm sweeps through, opening its mouth to swallow that anomaly whole. The secret is dragged back into the stomach of the permafrost. What did you see? A mirage caused by extreme cold? Or the edge of something the authorities never want you to find? Let's step back in time for a moment. Forget the 1949 plane, forget the advanced satellites, and return to an era when the edges of world maps were still filled with images of gaping sea monsters and the words, "Here be dragons." Official history, a conservative and senile old aunt, tells us that Antarctica was discovered in the 19th century. But what if I told you that someone had mapped the coastline of Antarctica long before that? Not the 18th century, but 1513. Exactly 300 years before any exploratory fleet dared to beat their chests and claim to be the first to set foot on the White Continent. And here is the most spine-tingling part. That ancient map doesn't show an Antarctica submerged in ice. It depicts it in detail, smooth and precise enough to expose the contours of a coastline completely free of ice. It looks exactly like what our radar satellites have only recently been able to scan in the modern era. How could that be possible when, according to geologists, Antarctica has been frozen for millions of years? You didn't mishear me. That map is real. It exists under the name the Piri Reis map. It was drawn on gazelle parchment by an Ottoman admiral, clearly displaying the coasts of Europe, Africa, and northern Antarctica. When modern scholars are confronted with this piece of parchment, what do? Oh, they scratch their heads, chuckle it off, and offer the most stereotypical explanation. He probably copied it from ancient Greek or Roman sources. Brilliant. An explanation that sounds academic, but is utterly hollow. Greece and Rome never mapped Antarctica. Some eccentric experts, perhaps the only sane ones, have pointed out the terrifying accuracy of Piri Reis could only be achieved if one used aerial survey technology or a superior transoceanic navigation technique that simply did not exist in that era. So, where did the original information come from? What madman sailed to the end of the world to map a naked continent before the Ice Age turned it into a white grave? That is when the whispers began. Whispers creeping through the cracks of time, speaking of fleets that vanished into thin air, of blood-stained decrees burned to ashes, and of men who didn't use the stars to find their way home, but used them to disappear. And amidst that chaotic noise, one name rings out repeatedly. Steady, cold, like a death knell tolling beneath the ice. The Knights Templar. Oh, I know what you're thinking. Crusader warriors in white cloaks with a flaming red cross on their chests. Characters exhausted by Hollywood and fiction novels, but forget the blockbusters for a moment. In the real world, they weren't just guys swinging swords in the name of God. They were the world's first bankers, master builders, and mystics holding secrets from the time of Solomon's temple. A brotherhood sworn to silence by blood. The official story says they ended in Paris when their great-grand master was tied to a stake and burned alive, ending a powerful empire. But what if that was just a grand performance? A bloody magic trick to distract greedy kings and a cowardly pope? While the fire was licking the flesh of their brothers, the true strength of the Templars, the ships, tons of gold, and ancient parchment scrolls containing forbidden knowledge, quietly weighed anchor under the dark curtain of night. Where did they go? Some say they went south, straight into the bone-chilling cold of Antarctica. Sounds like a drunkard's joke, doesn't it? What is there to find in a frozen wasteland? But the truth is, there is a massive black hole spanning centuries between the fall of the Templars in 1307 and the Age of Discovery. Their knowledge didn't evaporate. It was hidden. Transported on black ships, cutting through waves, beyond the reach of the Inquisitions. What if they followed a map older than Piri Reis? A map leading them to a secret vault untouched by war or kings. The trail left behind is extremely faint, but it is eerily strange. Monuments perfectly aligned with the southern stars, red crosses hastily carved onto desolate rocks where no human lived. Once you start following these tracks, you realize a terrifying truth. You can't stop. Because if even 1% of this story is true, it rewrites the entire history of humanity. Step up here with me. Listen to the tired creaking of the wooden planks under your boots. Smell the pungent scent of sea salt mixed with extreme tension. You are standing on the deck of a Templar ship. The massive white sail bearing the tattered Red Cross symbol is full of wind. Look up at the sky. The sky is no longer the familiar dome of stars you once looked up at from European bell towers. It is shifting. It is distorting. Because this ship's route isn't heading west to search for lands full of gold. It is piercing straight south, past the waters already marked on charts, past the stars already named. The bow is aiming straight for a constellation the church's astronomers didn't even know about, the Southern Cross. Leaving behind old Europe, the ship plunges into freezing winds and a silence so great it's incomprehensible. Look at the men around you. They aren't drunken pirates or fishermen looking for a living. They are silent. Their eyes are thick with a cold determination. They've seen something. They've read something in rotting parchment scrolls from the pre-Christian era. A truth too massive, too dangerous to continue existing in a Europe drowning in inquisitorial fire and blood. With every passing night, the cold bites deeper into the skin. The seawater turns from deep blue to a black as thick as tar. And then you start passing them. Massive icebergs, towering, magnificent, and more terrifying than any Notre Dame cathedral ever built by man. One morning you wake up. There is no longer the sound of waves hitting the side of the boat. A different kind of silence descends. It's not the absence of sound. It's the chill down your spine when you realize the presence of something incredibly ancient. Something watching you. In the distance of the horizon, a white land appears. Don't deceive yourself. It's not a harmless layer of falling snow. It's not a mirage born of hunger or cold. It is real, solid, ruthless, and calculated. What did they find when they took their first steps onto that frozen kingdom? Massive caves carved with the spirals of a dead civilization? Megalithic stone circles buried in the frost? Or mossy ruins that existed before the legend of the Great Flood was even invented by man? There are theories. Oh, of course, there are plenty of rumors. Some suggest the Templars found the tombs of a superior pre-human civilization sleeping under the permafrost. Others, more practical and darker, believe they built something there. An apocalypse vault, an underground temple, or a massive memory machine. Something absolutely not meant for human hands to touch for centuries to come. If this theory is correct, then the ancient maps they carried weren't passports for exploration. They were danger signs, warnings written in blood. Now open your eyes. Don't just be a passive spectator listening to a story. You are a detective, a seeker. Somewhere out there, beyond the thick fog of official history, beyond the cold that numbs even memory, is a truth being suffocated. But wait. I know a question is lingering in your mind. How did armored knights carrying swords know how to pilot ocean-going vessels? How ridiculous that history only remembers the Templars as crusaders stained with blood on the sands of Jerusalem. Few remember, or deliberately forget, that they were masters of navigation. They built and maintained one of the most sophisticated, massive, and deadly naval networks in medieval Europe. Their fortified ports at La Rochelle and Marseille weren't just places to trade wheat or wool. They were escape hatches, launch pads into the dark seas where the prying eyes of the church and kings could not reach. In 1291, Acre fell. The last Crusader stronghold in the Holy Land crumbled to dust. Officially, the order lost its reason for existence. But do you think people holding power equal to an empire would obediently disband? No, the order didn't dissolve. It evolved. They silently reinforced their Black Fleet. Gold, silver, weapons, and treasures were secretly moved to remote ports. While the world gloated watching the Templars' land power decline, at sea, their octopus tentacles expanded secretly. They were preparing, not for a hopeless war with European kings, but for an expedition with no turning back. Conservative scholars often sneer and say the South Atlantic was a realm of darkness. But remember, the Phoenicians and Carthaginians ventured past the Pillars of Hercules in ancient times. Roman records spoke of passing the Canary Islands. Within the Templars' secret library vaults, places protected by death oaths were filled with Egyptian nautical charts, Arabian star charts, and even charred parchment scrolls rescued from the famous Library of Alexandria. These were things never allowed to be placed on the tables of royal scholars. By the early 14th century, the Templar fleet didn't use the clunky cog merchant ships. They built deep-hulled, high-speed vessels, specifically designed to rip through the massive waves of the ocean. What were they looking for out there? Trade? Forget it. You don't take a high-speed fleet to carry sheep. Some whisper they were transporting fragments of a heretical technology that the church feared. Others claim they were sailing along prophetic meridians, seeking the conjunction between the earth and the stars. And the stars they followed, ironically, were not in the familiar northern sky. The Southern Cross. Completely invisible to European eyes for centuries, it began to appear blatantly and defiantly in Templar logs and navigational symbols very early on. How can you draw something you've never seen? Unless some of them had gone far enough into the darkness, far enough to see that constellation rising over the black, cold, and lonely water. The Southern Cross wasn't just a cluster of stars. It was a landmark, a destination, a summons from the realm of death. And beneath those stars, below the eternal darkness, was an alien, unnamed South, waiting with an open mouth for its first guests. Why? That is the question surely clawing at your mind right now. Why would an order of ultimate power, flush with gold and backed by the Pope, send its greatest minds sailing to a place like Antarctica? Power? A refuge? Or was it because of something much darker and more ancient? Knowledge, barely surviving in the fragmented shards of symbols hidden in tomb vaults? Let me enlighten you a bit. The Templars didn't view geometry the way you yawned through it in high school math class. To them, geometry wasn't about lifeless numbers. It was memory. A circle, a square, or a cross was a cosmic code, the language of God. If they truly undertook a suicide journey to the cold Antarctic realm, it wasn't to plant a flag or build a second Paris on ice. It was to find a prime coordinate where heaven fits perfectly with the earth, where the alignment of hard rock and the starry sky could unlock or seal something the world had forgotten. If they found that place, believe me, they wouldn't build a city. They would build a vault. A vault sitting outside the edge of time, immune to human greed. A frozen library, an absolute sacred silence. They only left behind subtle signs, sharp geometric stone structures that no blizzard could erase. And you think those secrets were forever buried under the snow? You've underestimated them. There are reports, never bearing a royal seal, of course, of maps circulating in maritime circles in the centuries that followed, maps redrawn from Templar records, clearly indicating lands in the far south. Have you ever heard of Prince Henry the Navigator of Portugal? History praises him as a pioneering mind of the age of discovery. But what if he didn't discover anything? What if the documents he possessed were actually a will passed down from Templar sailors through secret societies? Look at the maritime associations of the 15th century. Their symbols are strange. Red crosses, roses, geometric stars. They said those symbols were for protection. Protection from what? From pirates or from the eyes of the Inquisition? When the Templars were hunted, many knights fled to Portugal and were absorbed into the Order of the Knights of Christ. Don't laugh, but the seals, rituals, and even ship designs of this new order were so identical to the Templars that it was as if they just changed the name on the sign. The Order of the Knights of Christ was the one that funded the voyages leading to the discovery of Brazil and beyond. Do you still think that was discovery? No, my friends. It was a continuation, a mission, reactivated after centuries of lying still in the shadows. But to understand why they had to hide in the darkness, we must turn back the wheels of time to a fiery autumn night. The night history was diverted in a different direction by meanness and greed. October 1307, France. The night sky was lit not by stars but by fire. But the real destruction didn't lie in those flames. The destruction lay in the eerie silence that followed. In cities across France, a thunderous knocking on doors rang out before dawn. Wooden doors shattered under the heels of royal guards. Templar knights were dragged ruthlessly from their beds. Men who had bled for the Christian world were now thrown into dungeons by a decree soaked in the money lust of King Philip IV, a king indebted to the Templars up to his neck who decided to cancel the debt by liquidating the creditor. The charge? Heresy, magic, deliberately blaspheming God. By sunset, the world's greatest order had become hunted like wild beasts. But Philip IV, in his bloodlust and greed for the Templar gold hoard, soon realized he had been made a fool. When the guards broke into the headquarters, the vaults, the treasuries, what did they find? Empty. Gold and silver? Nowhere to be found. Holy relics? Vanished. Parchment scrolls containing ancient wisdom? Evaporated. Everything had been cleared out, as if the Templars had the power of invisibility. And the most painful slap for the king? Their naval fleet anchored at La Rochelle. Dozens of massive ocean-going ships had vanished without leaving a single plank. Not seized by the church, not sunk. They simply dissolved into the air. Imagine the port of La Rochelle in the cold, early morning mist, just before the king's guards arrived. Dark shadows moving rhythmically in absolute silence. A massive ship shuddered slightly, detaching from the dock. The sky was gray. the seawater pitch black. Not a single lantern, not a single shout, only the hiss of rope friction against wooden hulls. They weren't fleeing in panic. They were executing a retreat plan that had perhaps been calculated decades in advance. The cargo stowed in the holds wasn't wool or wheat. It was sealed chests, carefully wrapped parchment scrolls, and strange geometric measuring devices. One of the most spectacular escapes in history. Some ships may have gone north to Scotland, some may have gone west. But what about the third direction? The direction no bounty hunter would think of, south, into the eternal cold. It was a perfectly orchestrated event on Friday the 13th. Yes, my friends, if you've ever wondered why the world fears Friday the 13th to this day, it's not because of demons. It's because on that day, the supreme power of Europe realized there are those who can evaporate along with the entire treasure of the world right under their noses. The sea swallowed them. No record of pursuit, no drifting wreckage, eternal silence. But, as I said, the sea is a very poor secret keeper. The sea is a very poor secret keeper, my friends. It can swallow massive fleets, but it always whispers forbidden things into the ears of survivors. Those whispers still linger in the foul-smelling taverns of remote port towns, in family crests of unknown origin, and in oral stories about ships bearing red crosses arriving at lands beyond the edge of the world. But the real question is, exactly what did they carry in those dark cargo holds? The Holy Grail? Sorry to ruin your fantasy, but leave that mystical nonsense to Hollywood directors. The Holy Grail can't save you from sub-zero temperatures and the Inquisition. What they carried was far more practical and dangerous. Ancient texts, manuscripts of forgotten geometry, essays on alchemy, and artifacts wrapped in forbidden rituals. These weren't tools to seize power. They were things that needed to be kept safe from the barbaric hands of ignorant kings. What if the elite of the Knights Templar had seen through the future, that the coming centuries would plunge humanity into a dark period, a bloody shift in the era of man? They weren't fleeing. They were conducting history's greatest campaign to preserve the light. Not in gilded cathedrals, but in absolute exile. And fragments of the truth began to drift into the following centuries. In the yellow diary of a 17th century Jesuit monk, there is a spine-chilling cryptic entry about distant ruins to the south, massive stone blocks, not cut by man, but by will. That entry is very brief. But you know what's more terrifying? The page immediately following it was violently torn out. Someone had read it and decided the world wasn't ready for the rest of the story. Then in 1502, a Portuguese sailor shivering told a story of a haunted island swallowed by mist, far south of the Cape of Good Hope. No life, not even the sound of a bird. Only the sound of the wind whistling through a massive block of stone with a circle surrounding a cross carved in the center. The sailor swore the place bore a curse, too cold to stay and too ancient to be erased from memory. Upon return, his crew was forced to bite their tongues in silence. Official history ignored it, leaving only a hastily written note in the margin of a worn-out diary. Even to this day, in underground secret societies, people still whisper about a southern archive, It's not a cloud server or an encrypted hard drive. It is physical, buried, frozen, and sealed not just by wisdom, but by a responsibility weighing on generations. Legend within these circles says that whoever finds it is not allowed to open it. They must protect it, because the message inside is not for our chaotic age, but for the next age when humanity is finally mature enough to understand. The fall of the Templars in 1307 was not the end. It was an explosion that scattered sparks across the world. But who? Who was mad and genius enough to lead those sparks across the ocean? Behind the veil of mystery of the lost fleet, behind the warrior's cloak, was a group of people history has deliberately erased. They didn't wield swords. They wielded compasses and sights. They were called by haunting names: the maritime priests, the star readers, the sea monks. They didn't memorize scriptures in bright cathedrals. They memorized the sky from dark caves, where stars were observed through carefully carved fissures. One of them was Friar Mature of St. Angilme. No birth record, no tomb. Only a faint encoded line in the Portuguese archives. M of G mapped the frozen edge under the eagle's tail. Modern decoders believe the eagle is the constellation Aquila, and the frozen edge can only mean a suicide trip to the South Pole. Then we have Arno Devil, a high-ranking knight, a man labeled a heretical alchemist by the church. Arno possessed top-secret nautical charts inherited from the Moors. His library evaporated just before the guards arrived in 1307. In his servant's diary, Arno often muttered about a white threshold outside the garden of God. You can call that poetry. I call it Antarctica. But these sea monks were not alone. They needed a safe harbor to be reborn, and they found it in Portugal, under the protection of King Dinis, known as the Farmer King. Don't let the name fool you. While outwardly pretending to bow to the Roman Pope, Dinis opened his arms to the hunted Templars. He established the Order of the Knights of Christ, a perfect new bottle for the aged Templar wine. Lands, symbols, ships, everything was kept intact. Under Dinis, the sea monks continued their work. And look, Portuguese explorers then began charging like moths to a flame down the seas south of Africa, long before Europe could realize what was happening. Do you really think they were discovering blindly for trade? Or were they just following a route already laid out in blood and shadows centuries before? Now, stand on the deck of that nameless ship once more. The wind hits your face freezing cold. You aren't fleeing Europe. You are moving forward. The sea is gray, endless. The captain stands as motionless as an ice statue, his gaze fixed on an invisible coordinate. And beneath your feet, deep in the ship's hold, is a wooden box sealed with opaque wax. On it is nothing but a red cross and a golden star. They brought it to a white continent where truths have been buried under the ice for tens of thousands of years, and perhaps it is still there, waiting. Have you ever wondered how fragile the history we obediently memorize actually is? We like to believe humanity walks on a straight line, from cavemen to geniuses who invented the wheel, and then, boom, We have satellites and smartphones. A perfect evolutionary story, carefully censored by the wisest minds of empires. You are walking down into the lower hold of a ship, flying the banner of the Knights Templar. Around you is thick darkness, only torn apart by a flickering lantern hovering in the hand of your guide. The air here is very special. It is pungent with the aggressive smell of sea salt, the suffocating scent of tar, and something much more ancient, like the smell of 1,000-year-old catacombs. Around you, there is no gold or silver treasure. Heavy oak chests are marked with mystical symbols, crisscrossed with red wax seals. Inside them is cowhide parchment and lines written in ink saturated with crushed minerals. A man approaches you, white cloak, blood-red cross blending into the shadows. He doesn't say a word. The silence of those who hold secrets always has a suffocating weight. He slowly opens a chest, carefully pulls out a rolled-up map. You touch it. It's not rough like normal animal skin, but light and thin, persistent like pressed linen. And on its surface is something that would give any history professor a heart attack. A faint but perfectly sharp arc, curving into the shape of a massive continent that no contemporary map of yours records. He remains silent, only faintly raising his deep eyes, nodding toward the distant stars in the south. Oh, don't be surprised if maps of this kind ever accidentally appeared in the sunlight. They would have turned into brilliant ashes under the fires of the Inquisitions. The church at that time had a very elegant hobby of roasting anyone and anything that dared to say the world was larger or older than their Bible. The history of empires is written in blood and erasure, but you see, you can't burn something you can't find. These maritime priests who could read the sky like you read a morning newspaper were protected by patrons who operated entirely in the shadows. Who were they? They were those who moved like ghosts, not caring for the aura of fame, not bothering to write loud manifestos. Their hearts didn't beat for the desire to conquer land or loot gold. Their only goal was continuity. They believed the universe has immutable laws. Knowledge once stolen from human memory might fall into a permanent void, unless someone is crazy enough and brave enough to ensure it survives. These individuals, they weren't lost wanderers or sleepwalking sailors. They were the intellectual elite, initiated through the deepest rituals, operating in the blurry boundary between fervent faith and cold reason. I like to call them the architects of memory. Their maps weren't merely physical guides to avoid reefs. They were metaphysical. They were a key. To them, Antarctica was never just a lifeless block of ice. It was the terminal point of wisdom, a cruelly cold vault, patiently waiting for the keepers of the memory key to come and unlock it. And if you think this is just a cheap conspiracy theory, then let me throw a piece of fanged evidence in your face. Old, browned, and stained, marked with the creases of long sea voyages. The year 1513. A brilliant Ottoman naval admiral named Piri Reis drew it. Today, although we only have a tattered fragment of it left, what it describes is enough to make modern scholars break into a cold sweat and invent all sorts of pathetic reasons to cover it up. Beside the familiar lines of the west coast of Africa or the east coast of South America, this map fragment draws something ghostly accurate. the northern coast of what we today call Antarctica. But wait, here's the darkest part, and it doesn't draw a dead land submerged in tons of ice. Not at all. It depicts an extremely detailed coastline with deep bays, winding estuaries, and majestic rolling mountain ranges. Geographical features that we know for certain today have been buried under miles of thick ice for thousands of years. How? By what devilish way? Modern geologists beat their chests, claiming the Antarctic coastline hasn't been visible to the naked eye for at least 6,000 years. Yet there it sits, on a piece of leather from the 16th century, centuries before humanity officially sent the first trembling ships into this frozen region. Conservative scholars, of course, frantically tried to deny it. They said, "Oh, Piri Reis just imagined it," or "He probably mistakenly drew a part of South America." Ridiculous. You can't mistakenly draw a system of mountains and estuaries that perfectly matches 20th century subglacial radar scan data. In the 20th century, cartographer Charles Hapgood dropped a bomb on the scientific community by proving that the original maps Piri Reis used as reference must have been drawn using spherical trigonometry. Spherical trigonometry! That requires an understanding of the actual curvature of the Earth that was millennia ahead of its time. Hapgood believed these source maps were the legacy of an advanced civilization wiped off the face of the Earth, perhaps Atlantis or something similar. And this knowledge was smuggled through generations via secret channels. And do you know who the greatest, most perfect secret channel during that dark period was? Exactly. The lineage of the Knights Templar. Those who didn't leave behind bulky, heavy books easily thrown into the fire. They left coordinates. They didn't leave empty confessions. They scattered breadcrumbs. And if we, you and I, are sober enough to follow those tracks, it won't lead us to a moldy grave. It leads straight to a threshold, a frozen, freezing threshold, hiding the truth about our own origins. Do you think Piri Reis was a unique incident? A random system error of history? Oh no, my friends. History has no isolated incidents. It has patterns, and once you start seeing the patterns, that is the moment you can no longer go back to being an obedient sheep. Let's skip ahead a few decades. In 1531, Orontius Phineas, a French mathematician and cartographer, released another map. On it, Antarctica looms large once again. And guess what? Again, there are babbling rivers, rolling mountain ranges, and coastlines basking in the sun without a single flake of ice. Then, in 1569, the father of modern map projection that your Google Maps still piggybacks on, Gerardus Mercator, also left clear hints of a massive land in the south with geography so symmetrical it's spine-chilling. Don't tell me these are just tavern rumors. These men were the great minds of the Renaissance. They didn't doodle while drunk. They were copying. They were following something much larger, a tradition, a grand template of antiquity that had been lost. But the most expensive question here is, if 16th century cartographers were working based on older sources, then who the hell was keeping them? Who hid those fragile parchment scrolls through centuries of smoke and fire, through bloody religious wars, through the Inquisition pyres that lit up the European sky, only for them to reappear perfectly at the exact moment humanity began to sail the high seas. Welcome to the invisible empire of the Knights Templar. Forget the image of stupid crusader knights who only knew how to swing swords and kill for God. No. The Knights Templar were the world's first and most perfect multinational corporation. Unlike corrupt royal or ecclesiastical organizations, they possessed a unique structure. Their network of preceptories stretched across Europe and the Middle East. They were not bound by any borders, did not have to bow to any kings, and were operated by their own top-secret code of laws. This absolute independence allowed them to do something the Church utterly loathed: collect, copy, and protect pagan texts from countless different cultures. They sat at the same table as Muslim scholars in the Levant and traded with shrewd merchants across the Mediterranean. Do you think they only bought silk and spices? No. They bought knowledge. Did they snatch secret nautical charts based on the navigation of the Phoenicians, the Moors, or even ancient Egyptian priests? Yes. And they didn't just read. They sailed themselves, verified it themselves, adding coordinates from voyages that reached far beyond the limits of contemporary imagination. There is a strange coincidence in the timeline, a coincidence that makes my detective's nose ache. In the early 1300s, the massive fleet of the Knights Templar vanished without a trace, evaporated, scot-free. For the next 2 centuries, silence reigned. Then suddenly, boom! Renaissance cartography exploded with ghostly precision. Maps that weren't supposed to exist sat proudly on royal tables. The Church called it a miracle. Historians call it a coincidence. But me? I call it history's greatest knowledge laundering system. That knowledge never died. It was passed from hand to hand in the shadows, from one generation to the next, whispered through secret guilds, anonymous religious orders, or families bound by something thicker than blood. Memory. Close your eyes again. Visualize with me. A cold stone study in the early 1500s. A beeswax candle flickers, dripping like tears. A cartographer is hunched over a tattered scroll. Its edges are charred. The burnt smell of time still lingers. The ink has faded, but the drawings are still as sharp as a razor. He doesn't know where this damn thing came from. He only knows one thing. This scroll was given to his grandfather by a strange man wearing a necklace with a blood-red cross. The only instruction? Only copy what you see. Keep your mouth shut and never ask about its origin. And he followed it. His quill scraped against the parchment, covertly transferring a 1,000-year-old secret into the new age. When the final stroke was complete, the original scroll was burned or shoved back under the rotting floorboards. And its copy? It became our map. It sits in museums today, leaving scholars with a headache to explain. Many of these maps contain characters that are now forever lost. Ancient scripts, coordinates drawn in languages humans have forgotten how to pronounce. They point to mountain ranges never explored by anyone, coastlines that humanity only confirmed were a centimeter-perfect match once we had space satellites. For centuries, the scientific community mocked them as anomalies. But when you piece the fragments together, it creates a clashing echo of a truth that the victors erased too cleanly. If the Knights Templar had a hand in this, they weren't just adventurous sailors. They were the ancient custodians of geography. Their red cross has been found carved deep into stone as far away as Brazil, or sitting proudly above the entrances of unexplored cave systems. People say it's a hoax. A hoax? Or perhaps those are checkpoints. Neon signs that are bright yet invisible to the average person, left behind not for humanity to find, but only for those who already know where to look. And if you understand a Templar's worldview, you'll see things get even crazier. They didn't navigate with dry mathematics. They were builders of meaning. Every stone they laid, every dimension of their chapels and temples followed sacred geometry. So what happens if the mapping of Antarctica was never, ever about conquering land or planting colonial flags? What happens if that map was actually a ritual document? They drew it to recognize a sacred land, a ground zero, where heaven and earth collide in sparks, a place where something darker, older than their religion, is whispering right beneath the permafrost. Welcome back. It's time we stop looking at moldy parchment and turn our eyes to what is actually lying beneath the feet of this world. At Antarctica, when satellite technology became powerful enough to pierce through miles of ice, the mainstream scientific community gasped. Radar scans didn't just show lifeless rock. They revealed bizarre structures, razor-sharp mountain ranges, geometric layouts, and even shapes identical to pyramids. Of course, the crowd in white lab coats on TV will rush to reassure you, oh, don't worry, that's just natural erosion carved by wind and ice. Natural? Nature carves out perfect polygonal shapes. Do you think Mother Nature is so bored that she brings a protractor to this dead land to draw right angles? There's a brutally ironic detail right on the Piri Reis map we discussed in the previous part. That admiral personally wrote a note in the margin. This map was patched together by him from 20 older nautical charts, some dating back to the time of Alexander the Great. He didn't name the authors, but he emphasized the antiquity, the absolute accuracy, and the most chilling fact: they can no longer be found in this world. Why were they destroyed? Why would anyone need to hide data about a land that humanity never set foot on? The existence of this map proves one thing: humanity's first insights into Antarctica did not come from exploration. They came from memory. Things started heating up, or cooling down, depending on how you call it, in 2016. A satellite photo of Queen Maud Land in Antarctica was accidentally leaked. It showed a perfectly symmetrical triangular shape, half buried in the snow. That place is so remote that even bacteria don't care to live there. It hasn't seen a human shadow for millennia. When this image appeared briefly in a geological report, a war broke out. The devout followers of conservative science insisted it was natural rock. But those who dared to open their eyes saw a man-made structure. The trouble is, what makes your skin crawl isn't its shape, but the angles. They are too precise, too perfect. It proves that whoever designed it understood that symmetry isn't for decoration. Symmetry is a language. And it's not alone. Deeper ground-penetrating radar scans have found straight linear patterns stretching for miles. These patterns exactly repeat the geometric arrangements of megalithic monuments scattered across the world. Some lines even radiate from a central point, exactly like bicycle spokes. Sorry, but geology doesn't work in grids. These are grand systems lying dormant in a frozen tomb, waiting for a wink from time. This brings us to a theory the academic world wants to bury alive: Earth crustal displacement. What would happen if a cataclysm, a flash shift of the magnetic poles, once threw this temperate continent to the far south and froze it instantly? If that's true, the things beneath that ice aren't myths. They are the ruins of a civilization swallowed by catastrophe. And here, gentlemen, is when the ghosts of the Knights Templar reappear, smiling at us. The Templars were obsessed with symbols. In their cathedrals across Europe, you will see spirals carved into stone, things nowhere to be found in the Bible. The bizarre thing is that these spirals match millimeter for millimeter with the ruins of the ancient Celts, the Berbers in Africa, or the Andes people in far South America. Why does the same pattern, the same ratio, appear on continents separated by thousands of miles of ocean? Very simple. The Knights Templar were the heirs of pre-catastrophe knowledge. And if Antarctica was the original kingdom of that knowledge, encoding it into architecture instead of writing it on paper was a stroke of genius. Follow me. You are entering an underground cave beneath the ice, a biting wind lashing your back. You hold a blazing torch. The rock beneath your feet is unnaturally smooth, the cave walls narrow. You reach out a bare hand to stroke that freezing surface. You feel the carved grooves, a spiral, a star, a cross, with perfectly equal arms. This is not the graffiti of primitive men. These are messages arranged in stone. You raise the torch high. Suddenly the fire glints on a piece of metal embedded deep in the eternal wall. It's impossible. Something has been forged. In 2003, an expedition to Lake Vostok, the massive freshwater lake deep beneath the Antarctic ice, stumbled upon a massive magnetic anomaly. Guess what happened next? The entire data set was immediately classified. Total gag order. But secrets are like water. They always find a crack. Private contractors involved in ice drilling began to whisper in bars. They spoke of stone slabs carved with interlocking circles pulled up from under the drill bit. They spoke of a cross symbol carved with peerless craftsmanship. Naturally, internet skeptics will jump up. Where is the proof? Show the photos. I agree. Science always needs proof, and history is always slower than legend. But satellite data has confirmed there are massive heat pockets under the ice, warm enough to perfectly preserve structures of stone, wood, or metal. And right in those heat pockets, geometric anomalies appear with the highest density. Just recently, an AI software scanning satellite data alerted to a massive circular structure surrounded by 4 equally spaced mountain ranges. Viewed from above, it bears the absolute shape of the Knights Templar cross. Government analysts laughed it off again. Just a coincidence. But minds well-versed in sacred geometry measured it, and they realized its proportions are identical, down to every digit, with the layout of Templar preceptories in southern France. What the hell is a mile-wide preceptory doing under the Antarctic ice? If you still haven't had enough dark, listen to this. A top-secret UK document from the late 1950s, accidentally declassified, recorded that an expedition team found a metal object. It looked like no modern drill bit. It looked like a hammer. Yet it was designed with perfect symmetry, always radiating a chill even if you held it with thick gloves. And specifically, it was made for hands larger than human hands. The lead geologist slipped up and revealed this in an unrecorded interview. He died suddenly shortly thereafter. The file was closed forever. And here is the killing blow to your skepticism. 1939. A Norwegian geologist happened upon a cliff face exposed during a brief thaw. He wrote in his diary about finding a massive star wheel carved right above the entrance to a cave. That symbol is a 100% match with the stone works of the 14th century Knights Templar in Portugal. Carving into a cliff at that height and position required technology that was absolutely impossible in 1939. That cave was quickly buried by snowstorms again. The final line in the Norwegian geologist's diary was not the excitement of a scientist. It was pure terror. He wrote, "May it remain forever buried." October 1307, Friday the 13th. You've likely heard this story. King Philip IV of France and his puppet Pope cast a massive net, sweeping up the Knights Templar in one night. The Inquisition fires were lit, flesh scorched, oaths tortured until they shattered. That is what history books stuff into your head. But there is a massive puzzle piece that has been punched out of that picture. The Templar fleet anchored at the port of La Rochelle. On that fateful night, dozens of massive ships, armed to the teeth, carrying the Order's greatest treasures, vanished, evaporated, scot-free. So perfect that not a single broken plank or ripple was left behind. Do you think they fled in panic, like rats fleeing a sinking ship? Wrong. They vanished with a clear purpose, sharp as a freshly whetted sword. They didn't leave as fugitives running from the law. They left as pilgrims. The silence that surrounded their fall was not the silence of death, but the silence of a spine-chilling precision. Where was their destination? The crowd out there will throw a dozen noisy theories at you. They hid in Scotland. They washed up in Portugal. They even found America before that lost guy Columbus. But in the darkest secret societies, there is a quieter and much colder theory, the Southern Migration Theory. This theory suggests that part of that invisible fleet sailed straight down into the dead waters, following ancient nautical routes passed down through astrology, Phoenician maps, and myths that existed before Jesus was even born. They didn't navigate with a stupid magnetic compass. They navigated by memory. Throughout the Middle Ages, Europe's knowledge of the southern sky was a flat zero. Yet, in some ruins of Templar chapels as far as Europe, strange carvings were found, constellations that only exist in the southern hemisphere, winged shapes, squiggly arcs, and hitting us right in the eye is the 4-star pattern of the Southern Cross. It was placed symmetrically with the North Star, carrying equal spiritual weight. How the hell did a 13th century stonemason carve a southern constellation hundreds of years before Europeans discovered it? Unless they had sailed far enough to see it for themselves. Feel it. You are standing on the deck of a Templar ship. The deck vibrates violently beneath your feet. The oak groans like an old throat screaming in the dark. No one in the crew says a word. Their eyes are wide open, reflecting a sky full of strange, cold stars. You scan the thick night, and there, 4 stars arranged in the shape of a curved cross, shining dimly through the mist of the Southern Ocean. The Southern Cross. You are further from the human world than anyone you've ever known, and in front of the ship, in that white mist, something is waiting. Not land, not lifeless blocks of ice, but something else. And don't think they plunge down there blindly. Arab merchants had long whispered of a land of white silence lying beyond the final winds. Polynesian oral legends also preserve the memory of great voyages into the frozen waters, a land that both repels life and preserves all things forever. The Knights Templar followed a network of safe harbors maintained in top secrecy along the coasts of the Atlantic and Indian Oceans, from the Canary Islands to Cape Verde and even the lonely volcanic island of Tristan da Cunha. In remote fishing villages in Africa and South America to this day, people still tell legends of white men bearing red crosses. They docked not to loot or trade. They docked only to repair their massive ships with strange tools in absolute silence. They didn't fly flags. They didn't give names. They passed through like ghosts, and the bow was always pointed south. But the million-dollar question is, why? They weren't idle explorers looking for new land to farm. They were preservers. They were fleeing to bring something that the Roman Church was not allowed to touch with its blood-stained fingers. A final map? A forbidden relic? Or a set of chronicles preserving ancient knowledge that predates the existence of Jerusalem? Remnants of a civilization drowned deep at the bottom of myth. Antarctica, with its veil of eternal frozen mystery, is a tomb, a perfect, impenetrable cathedral. Centuries later, the mystic Helena Blavatsky wrote spine-chilling lines about the Southern Archive, a crystalline refuge imprisoning the wisdom of humanity at the bottom of the earth. Encrypted prophecies of the Templar order also mention a kingdom untouched by the Tower of Babel, where the earth still remembers. Is Blavatsky reflecting an even older trace, a trace left behind by those men in white cloaks? Visualize this scene. You are standing on the jagged rocky coast south of an unnamed island in Antarctica. The wind is like a razor blade tearing through your cloak. Sea salt is frozen hard on your beard. Behind you, the massive wooden ship is anchored in the pitch-black water. In front of you, a massive granite block protruding from the eternal snow. Its surface is ghostlily smooth, unnatural. You step forward. Every crunching step tears through millions of years of silence. At the center of the rock, half buried, are intricately carved spirals embracing a single cross. You kneel. Your freezing hand clears away the thick snow. Beneath that stone slab is a deep passage leading into the ground. A door not guarded by guns or swords, but sealed by the absolute cold of white hell. The greatness of the southern route does not lie in geographic distance. It lies in renunciation. It is a brutal sacrifice. Not a single letter was sent home. Not a single flag was planted to claim kingship. Not a single monument was erected to honor a name. It was an oath, sealed by frost. Those who sailed into that white realm accepted a bitter fate. Their names and flesh would be forever forgotten by history. Only symbols would barely survive. Only whispers hidden beneath the rock. They chose that isolation to protect a frequency, a truth, hidden beneath stone and ice, where earth and sky converge. Official history may call them heretics who were destroyed. But perhaps, just perhaps, they are the final victors, sitting silently in the dark beneath the feet of the world, waiting for that ice to melt. Mainstream history always loves neat endings, don't you agree? They love to stuff complex events into square boxes, nail them down with dates and years in textbooks, and tell us, it's done, disperse. The Pope taps the gavel. The King of France smiles triumphantly. The Knights Templar, those who held both the faith and the wallet of Europe, are declared dissolved, burned alive at the stake. The end. Ashes scattered to the wind, but you and I both know a brutal truth. Those who truly hold power never wait for death to knock on the door. They escape. If there was a great migration of Templar remnants to the south, it left no diary entries. Not a single nautical chart was presented to royal archives with a bright red ribbon. Why? Because when you are fleeing the swords of the entire Western world, you don't leave breadcrumbs for the crows to peck. It was a shift of will, an escape plan only whispered between those who understood too well the price of failure. Perhaps only a few battered ships slipped through the blockade. Perhaps only one. But think about it. What did they carry? Not gold or silver? Gold is heavy and useless in the middle of the ocean. What they carried was knowledge, cursed relics, and cleverly encoded memories. And I bet you, those things are still lying somewhere beneath the permafrost, patiently waiting. For centuries, we humans have suffered from a strange short-sightedness. We frantically look west to satisfy our greed for discovery, then look east to seek the comfort of wisdom. But what if history's greatest, most terrifying silence lies in the south? Not the desolation of a dead continent, but a massive refrigerator of time. Preservation. The Knights Templar didn't need a new kingdom to rule. They only needed to exist. And you know the most basic rule of hide and seek. The best place to hide something precious is the most barren place where no fool would want to set foot. But to go into that void, they couldn't go alone. History says the Templar remnants in Portugal were saved by the merciful King Denis, merged into the brand new Order of Christ. Well, a very political cicada shedding its skin act. But if you are a sharp enough detective, you'll smell something fishy here. This new order didn't just sit around reciting prayers. They poured money frantically into secret expeditions out into the Atlantic. Ships weighed anchor without clear destinations and port logs. They didn't follow lucrative trade routes, but drifted along ancient, old maritime meridians. Were they looking for a new horizon? Or were they shielding ghosts moving south? From Portugal, the murky wake leads us straight to the African coast. Imagine the scorching heat of the Sahara, the Tuareg mystics, the Berber tribes in wild Mauritania. They have oral legends recorded not in ink, but in the memory of their veins. They tell of strange warriors arriving from the sea, white-skinned, bearing Red Cross insignia on their chests. The interesting thing, you know what? These guys were nothing like the European colonizers who came to loot or force anyone to kneel before their god. No. They came here in exhaustion, seeking refuge. They carried crumpled parchment scrolls, speaking a language older than the Arabic of the desert. Their appearance was as brief as a mirage, but The way they repaid hospitality is what gives me goosebumps, not with money, but with symbols of sacred geometry, with the movement of the stars. Do you understand the meaning of this? They were exchanging codes with the natives, and then the madness of this story reaches its peak in South America. Forget the parchment maps hidden in European monasteries. In the Andes, centuries before the Spaniards brought disease and guns, Peruvian weavers created fabrics not meant for wearing. They were ancient GPS systems. The patterns on them contained navigational motifs, elemental arrangements morbidly identical to the seals of the Knights Templar, and all those jagged diagonal lines converged in one direction, the southern nodes, not aiming at Cusco nor stopping at Lake Titicaca. They pointed straight into the empty white void of the world map. Coincidence? I don't believe in coincidence. Now close your eyes and visualize this scene with me. A pitch-black night on the wind-swept Patagonia Plateau. Two men sitting opposite each other. A fire crackles. No one says a word to the other. Language at this moment is meaningless. Instead, a woven cloth is unfolded on the cold ground, soft yet precise to the millimeter. The foreigner, bearing the remnants of a great rejected knighthood, slowly uses his finger to trace a spiral on it. That finger slides down, pointing straight toward the frozen south. The Andean man looks on, then slowly nods. His eyes hold no surprise, because he has seen that symbol before. Not on fabric, not on stone, but in the starry sky. You see, in this dark hypothesis, the Knights Templar weren't sword-wielding invaders. They were wounded beasts who knew how to listen. They wisely integrated their existence into primal knowledge systems instead of stupidly trying to write over them. In that way, they created a network not of conquest, but of a spine-chilling, silent existence. But Patagonia was not the end. The gears of darkness have only just begun to turn. Do you think the network of fugitives only stopped in South America? Oh no. When you have bet your life on the ocean, you have no concept of a finish line. You keep going until your breath is exhausted, or until you find people willing to keep your secrets. Let's turn to one of the most fiercely contested pages of history. The kind of history that fat academic scholars in warm rooms always want to tear out. Those are the oral stories of the Maori. These oral records tell of the arrival of bearded pale men drifting in on narrow boats. They performed strange rituals on the beach. But what makes me shiver isn't their presence, but the things they clutch to their chests, as if clutching their very lives. They weren't weapons. They were stones and crystals, carefully wrapped in tattered animal hides. On them were carved intricate circles and intersecting lines. An ancient navigational tool? Or the relics the church was hunting? No one knows for sure. But before vanishing into the mist, these strange guests left one thing: spirals carved deep into hard stone. Look at these lines. They are identical to the carvings in South America, similar to the symbols of the Knights Templar, and even root deep down into the ancient Sumerian civilization. Do you call this trade? No, my friend. This is not the exchange of goods for fur or gold. This is the remnant of an alliance much deeper than that. an alliance never forged by the easily faded ink of treaties, but bound by wordless understanding. And if we follow this faint blood trail further south, the air will begin to freeze. Tierra del Fuego, Cape Horn, the end of the world, where the ocean roars and shatters against massive icebergs. In the sparse, cold folklore of the native Yamana, there are faint whispers of guests arriving from the frozen realm. They didn't call these people invaders. They called them the shadows in the snow. These shadows didn't carry swords or spears. They brought fire. They taught food preservation techniques to survive the eternal winter. And above all, they brought an absolute reverence for silence. This is the fatal piece of the puzzle. Red ochre traces in the caves. The double-barred cross of Jerusalem. You rarely see this symbol in traditional Catholic churches, but it is the definitive seal of the most mystical branches of the Knights Templar. Are these navigational landmarks? Bloody stopovers for ships coming after? If these whispers are true, we must rewrite the entirety of history. What we are witnessing is not an impulsive expedition or a random shipwreck. This is history's greatest relay race of preservation. A silent chain hidden away, consisting of keepers of fragments of ancient knowledge as it drifted toward the frozen south. The Knights Templar may not have been the originators. They only inserted themselves into that link, becoming custodians, passing the torch through the stormy night, promising with blood that the light would never go out. And if you think reaching Antarctica is the end of the story, then the Australian Aboriginal people would laugh in your face. Pay attention to the tradition of the song lines. These are not lullabies. They are the greatest maps ever created, not drawn on paper, but encoded into melodies and sung through thousands of generations. In these ancient songs, there is a chorus that makes the curious among us stand on end. They sing of guests falling from the sky, of those who bring the frost, who trudged through parched deserts to mark sacred rocks. A few of these rock clusters match with ghostly precision the coordinates of Antarctica, as if they were charting an ancient memory erased from the narrow brain of modern history. Who went to the trouble of arranging those stones? Why do they point toward that white void? Of course, official history maintains a posture of disdainful silence. They wave away these alliances, calling them illusions, the paranoia of conspiracy-minded brains. But why is there such fierce resistance? Where does that extreme discomfort come from when someone dares to suggest European mystical knowledge didn't die in the red fire of the Inquisition, nor did it lie discarded in rotting libraries? It survived through silent handshakes across oceans, across languages, and across the harshest landscapes. There is a supreme power in silence, my friend. There is a terrifying persistence in friendships that never leave behind a contract. This is not an alliance of kings who like to wear hollow crowns. This is the connection of the initiated, of those who look up at the stars not just to find their way home, but to read the gears of the universe. They don't see land as territory to be looted. They see the patterns of time. Therefore, this trail was never broken. The map is not on parchment, but in stone spirals. Star maps are woven into fabric. The Red Cross is sung in the desert night. A legacy molded from listening, not from arrogant declarations. And if you close your eyes, stay calm, and listen carefully, Even now, that whisper has never been lost. It is still there, waiting. But if they have gone that far, then who was it that desperately chased after them to bury them? It is often said that time is the greatest enemy of truth, that stories are buried simply under the dust of many centuries. How naive. You and I both know how this world works. Not everything is forgotten by accident. Some things are buried by design. If the Knights Templar, or those who inherited their ideology, truly cut through the waves toward the south and dropped anchor in forbidden lands, then someone must have caught the scent. And that someone would want to stifle this story in its cradle, to erase every trace, not just through cowardly silence, but through intentional, blazing fires. Think about it. The South was not just a blacked-out void on the map. It was vast, unsettling, bone-chillingly cold, and most importantly, no one had planted a flag to claim sovereignty. For those sitting on velvet-covered thrones in Europe, that was the real threat. A land that offered absolute freedom out of reach of both earthly scepters and the Pope's shepherd hooks. In 1312, when Pope Clement V, with King Philip IV of France holding a knife to his throat, figuratively speaking, but you get my point, issued the decree Vox in Excelso to dissolve the temple, it wasn't a religious personnel restructuring. It was a public execution of legitimacy. The order of the temple had become too rich, too mysterious, and too independent. And in a world of power-crazed lunatics, independence combined with ancient knowledge is a death sentence. But look at the underlined part of this bloody play. Even after the pyres had burned out, after the assets were seized, the trail didn't break. Some ships evaporated from the sea. Scrolls vanished without a trace. The burning of Templar archives across France and Italy wasn't an impulsive frenzy by low-ranking soldiers. It was systematic. Chronicles of that time recorded a strange obsession. They didn't just tear up accounting books. They frantically smashed symbols, scraped stone carvings clean, tore apart embroidered seals, and burned hand-drawn maps. Navigational instruments, compasses, astrolabes, star maps were confiscated and, oh, surprise, lost in transit to the Vatican. Why target maps and compasses? Unless they were pointing straight to somewhere extremely troublesome. Centuries passed and the age of discovery began. Spanish and Portuguese navigators, backed by orders saturated with Templar DNA, began reporting anomalous artifacts on distant shores. But then what? These findings were never included in official catalogs. Logbooks evaporated. Entire expeditions were wiped from the journals as if they never existed. Terra Australis Incognita, the unknown southern land, remained stubbornly on maps for centuries. Was it because no one could reach it? Or because someone had been there and someone else wanted it forgotten forever? Take Jean-Baptiste Bouvet as an example. In 1739, this French captain claimed to have stumbled upon a landmass near the Antarctic Circle, a ghostly volcanic island shrouded in mist. But the coordinates he provided danced like a group of drunks. Maps disappeared and then resurfaced in erased, edited forms. Ironically, this damn no-man's land suddenly appeared decades later, on heavily Templar-themed maps hidden in Jesuit archives. So, who stole whose copyright? Not finished yet. Let's talk about an anonymous manuscript that bombed Lisbon in the mid-1500s. O Livro de Sombra, the Book of Shadows. Those lucky enough to glimpse it whispered of a frozen kingdom lying under a serpent sky. It was filled with bizarre geometric designs, terrifyingly close to Templar architecture. The book was burned in the Great Fire of 1755. A poor scholar who had copied part of it set off for South Georgia Island and, boom, vanished along with his notes. A coincidence? A bitter laugh. I told you, there are no coincidences in this world, only patterns of silent oppression lubricated with blood. Then we have this time bomb, the Piri Reis map of 1513. An Ottoman admiral sketched coastlines that many scholars believe are Antarctica from a time before it had ice. He admitted to using maps from the era of Alexander the Great. Could it be that fragments of Templar knowledge wandered through Moorish libraries, only to fall into the hands of sailors who didn't even know what they were holding? What was trimmed away before they were presented to the eyes of kings? That habit of a cover-up never died. Even in the age of planes and radios, the legacy of suppression continues. In the early 20th century, British and Norwegian missions in Antarctica stumbled upon stone structures that nature could never have molded. Photos of hieroglyphs, stones arranged with intent, all evaporated from public archives and leaked into the hands of shadowy private collectors. What did the government say? Oh, that's just a geological mirage. Sorry, but I'm not buying that lazy explanation. And the climax of this absurd drama, Operation High Jump in 1946. The U.S. Navy brought a massive armed fleet to Antarctica just for training? Right, as if I'd bring a whole tank division for a walk in the park. Its scale and secrecy reek of suspicion. But the truth might not lie in the Navy's cannons. It lies deep beneath the soil of Rome, sealed Vatican documents regarding pre-Columbian navigation. Researchers who spent their lives in dark basements have sworn there are references to ships of the Brotherhood sailing south long before Columbus knew how to hold a compass. When asked to release the logs from that era, the church refused with a reason that sounds so noble: concerns about document preservation. Zorro smirks, laughing sarcastically. Preserving documents? Or are they preserving the world from a psychological earthquake? When you encounter the stubborn silence of so many powerful organizations throughout the centuries, you can't help but wonder, who are they really protecting? And what are they afraid will be found under that ice? Stop for a second and ask yourself, why? Why have so many organizations, from silk-clad popes to modern governments with satellites and nuclear weapons, colluded in a silence spanning centuries? Don't tell me it's just the weight of dogma or laziness, a reluctance to rewrite history textbooks. No. There is something much deeper, much more toxic. Something in Antarctica threatens to tear apart not just maps, but the very ideologies propping up our civilization. Too many fragments, too many names redacted, a language that doesn't use an alphabet, but communicates through shapes and silence. Who was so frantic that they drained every resource just to erase these things? if the Knights Templar chose the path south. They weren't taking a stroll. They went with a supreme purpose. And if the powerful in Europe tried to wipe them out, they did so with the urgency of those who feel the heat of hell on their necks. They aren't hiding the past to protect the past. They are protecting the future, your era and mine, from realizing our true origins. The question that keeps me awake is not what they hid, but what are they terrified will be exposed. In 1312, the world didn't explode when the Knights Templar evaporated from the stage of power. No lightning tore the sky over Paris or Rome. No royal decree was strong enough to echo forever in stone. The surface of history seemed calm. But beneath, the world shifted, silently and deadly, like ice melting under the weight of an ancient, invisible entity. The evaporation of the temple left a massive black hole, and nature, as an unchangeable theorem, absolutely loathes a vacuum. When the greatest protectors disappeared, merchants lost their way, and pilgrims were thrown to the wolves. But for careful observers, they felt a chilling truth. The core power of the temple was never extinguished or destroyed. It simply dissolved into the darkness, changing shape and shifting direction. And where did it shift? Look at Portugal. A brilliant magic trick. Former Templars who escaped the death sentence were immediately swept into the Order of Christ. They were granted land, warships, and protected by a dynasty that always had a strange appetite for secrets. Prince Henry the Navigator, the giant of the Age of Discovery, was the grand master of this order. A coincidence? Again, a coincidence? His fleet carried the same symbol, followed the same iron discipline, and sailed on ghostly routes, morbidly close to the routes the missing Templar ships once took. As these fleets cut through the waves to map the edge of the world, they carried an invisible cargo, the legacy of silence. And if you need proof enough to choke the academics, look for a dusty Jesuit record. It accidentally mentions an ancient sea route that the Portuguese brothers knew like the back of their hand. A route never drawn in ink, but only sung in the language of stone. Did you hear that clearly? The language of stone. What kind of devilish language is that? Why would lifeless rocks be able to speak directions to the frozen realm? Could those be the song lines in Australia, or the spiral engraved markers in New Zealand and South America? While Portugal was playing the game of exploration, Spain was playing the game of witch hunts. The Inquisition rose, sweeping through lands once covered by the shadow of the temple. History lulls you to sleep saying they hunted heretics. Don't dream of it. Whispers from the darkest corners of the Vatican say their real rage was a recovery mission, a frantic effort to dig up the relics, maps, artifacts, and stone-carved testimonies that the Knights Templar had defiantly hidden right under their noses. And not just in Europe, even across the Atlantic, the ripples of this fall continued to spread. Legends in South America and the Pacific still sing of white guests sailing red crosses, builders from the frozen realm who left no names and then vanished into the fire. Templar remnants? Or an echo of a civilization even older than them, awakened by the temple and tragically misunderstood by our modern ears? Decades passed, and the world changed. Banks fell into the hands of obese men wearing crowns and greedy corporations. Never Never again would there be an organization strong enough to gather faith, finance, and violence into a single fist like the Knights Templar did. Something broke. But amidst those ruins, anonymous celestial maps suddenly appeared in Venice, Lisbon, and Rhodes. Charts detailing constellations, only visible from the southern hemisphere, appearing before any southern voyages, were officially recorded. Who looked up at that night sky and secretly redrew them? In academic darkness, there is a principle. The absence of evidence is the most solid evidence. The gaps in archives, the burned maps, the smashed seals are not accidents. And if you prick up your ears to listen to the final faint echoes, you will find them coming from the 14th century nautical logs of the Hanseatic League. In yellowed coastal records around Bruges and Lübeck, there are notes that will freeze your blood, references to dark cargo, mysterious northern monks escorting invisible shipments, slipping through the harbor in the absolute silence of the night. What were they carrying away? And where to? The consequences of the dissolution of the temple didn't change the world overnight, but in the silent earthquakes, in the erased ink and swapped records, we feel its pulse. Something is still thumping beneath the ice, still hiding, still being feared. Have you ever wondered how to completely wipe out a legacy? Not with bloody killing on a battlefield. Blood is too noisy. The best way is to let silence swallow it. The records of the Knights Templar, the most powerful, richest, and most secret-holding organization of the Middle Ages, were not destroyed in a storm of war. No. Sadly, the truth is much more ironic. Those priceless documents appeared briefly for exactly 2 winters after the order fell, and then evaporated, vanished completely. Think about it. Mountains of books, maps, tons of knowledge moved during those twilight years. But where did they go? Don't look outward with such naivety. Look at the place that calls itself the protector of spiritual knowledge for humanity, the Vatican. After the temple fell, the church did what any wise victor would do. They silently gathered. Countless private libraries were swept clean over the next few generations. Among those spoils were collections so ghostly they were called apocryphal travelogues. Imagine books written in layers of encoded Latin, or even more terrifying, hieroglyphic languages that the scholars of the time looked at and saw only as the scratchings of demons. They were never published. No one was ever allowed to cite them. They were locked tight, thrown into the darkness. Decades later, people dug up the memoirs of an old archivist. He described a secret vault lying deep, deep beneath the basilica. He wrote a sentence like this: "There, snow falls in the stone." A smirk. A dogmatic archivist suddenly becoming a poet? Was he using a metaphor? Or did his earthly eyes truly see something beyond the boundaries of reason? A vault so cold it twisted space itself, where the forbidden knowledge of the temple was permanently refrigerated. The consequences of this were not recorded in history books, my friends. They were felt. Immediately following the disappearance of the Knights Templar, power in the world shifted quietly and chillingly. The religious orders born later suffered from an invisible fear. They didn't dare become too rich. They were terrified of being independent. The flow of knowledge that once crossed free borders suddenly froze, ceased, as if the whole world had just peered through a window, seen the ultimate truth of the temple's disappearance, and then recoiled in horror. They realized something extremely terrifying, something that needed to be stuffed deep into the earth, kept very tight, very quiet, and very cold. And you think that silence has slept through time? Centuries passed, yet the whispers refuse to die. Let's briefly leave the suffocating vaults of Europe and head to the coldest place on the planet, Antarctica. Modern science proudly brings machines here to drill through the Earth's crust. And what do they find? Ice core samples reveal anomalies that make geologists scratch their heads. Traces of soot, pieces of wood, and strange isotopes buried meters under the ice, dating back long before the grandfathers of the first modern explorers learned how to build a ship, who lit fires in the middle of this white continent when history says no human foot had ever stepped here. Officially, the academic world pats itself on the back and calls it an abnormal natural phenomenon. Natural. How convenient. When you can't explain a scream in the night, you say it's the wind. After all, the silence of history is also composed of such dismissive shrugs. In the end, dear friend, perhaps history is not molded by those screaming from high podiums or treaties signed in the sun. Real history, the dark history we are digging into, is shaped by what has been intentionally hidden. Those imprisoned truths create the folds of time rippling toward the future, quiet, noiseless, exactly like falling snow. They shape our world in ways that even now humans haven't been brave enough to fully understand. Do you think the Knights Templar evaporated? No. Those who held both a financial empire and the most terrifying intelligence network of the time did not fold their hands and wait for death at the stake. They fled. And when ghosts flee, they leave footprints. Not in sand, but carved deep into massive rock. Look at the Azores, an archipelago so isolated that perhaps God once forgot it in the middle of the cold waters of the Atlantic. Here, we find ancient stone foundations that don't belong to any indigenous culture. Perfect geometric carvings, eerily echoing the sacred symbols of the Knights Templar. Just a random coincidence, right? Academics love that phrase. It's a wonderful sedative for lazy minds. But this coincidence has a bad habit of spreading. Drift further south to southern Africa. In the oral history of ancient tribes, people who never knew the cross or European swords whisper to each other about mysterious guests. They call these strangers the star observers. Do you know what these people carried? Not gold, silver, or guns. They carried knowledge of a dark sun and maps depicting frozen fire. Frozen fire. Let those two words drift through your mind for a bit. Are these fragmented, shredded memories of a post-Templar Great Migration? Quiet, drifting in the darkness, and never once allowed to be revealed. Do you want to know what fear looks like? Look at the history of map security. Before the 14th century, maps were just amusing illustrations. They drew angels blowing wind, monsters chewing on boats. It was symbolic, spiritual, even naive. But immediately afterward, an invisible event struck. Maps suddenly transformed. They became extremely accurate. And most importantly, they were made top secret. Suddenly, Portugal, Spain, then England and France ordered a blockade on access to nautical charts. Kings hid maps like children hide matches. Why? Commercial competition? Perhaps. But also maybe those in power, while rummaging through the ashes of history, accidentally stumbled upon a deadly legacy. A legacy that needed to be absolutely shielded from the eyes of the public. A truth fished out from the silence of the glacial layers, etched into the brains of those who knew, and then buried alive once more. The ice remembers. That is the whisper that never appears in any academic journal or university podium. It exists in the darkest corners, lingering between the folds of rotting ancient books, when people stealthily mention the Templars' true knowledge of the Earth's South Pole. This truth is exactly like frost clinging to a window pane. It crystallizes into complex, cold shapes. Through that frost, we desperately try to catch a glimpse of an ancient truth. Centuries passed, and they began to stuff your head with fairy tales, that the Knights Templar were only concerned with the holy grail, glittering gold vaults, or some secret lineage. The truth is wrapped in layers of flashy and cheap cultural sediment. But beneath that cover, a haunting melody continues to rise in art, literature, and legend. A spine-chillingly repetitive motif. A secret society fleeing the pyre, carrying forbidden knowledge to hide in a white land. A land of absolute purity and eternal exile. And then, that ghost took shape. 1513. The Piri Reis map was born. Ottoman Admiral Piri Reis drew the coast of South America and a massive southern landmass with an accuracy that is morbid. Why morbid? Because the continent of Antarctica was officially not discovered by humans until the 19th century. Furthermore, on that map, the Antarctic coast appears ice-free, a geological state belonging to thousands of years ago. Piri Reis himself confessed that he patched it together from countless older maps that are now permanently missing. Some say they came from the Knights Templar, or mysterious pre-Columbian sources. But the real question, the question that will keep you awake tonight is, if Antarctica has been frozen for millions of years and those maps redrew its true rocky surface, then what great, mad, and anonymous hand held the pen to draw them? And when did they undertake that forgotten voyage? They didn't just leave fragments of history on paper. The echoes of the Knights Templar have deeply permeated the very way we perceive the world. Do you think their symbol died at the stake? Big mistake. It began to proliferate in the places the authorities least expected, not just on the pediments of cold churches, but it crawled into the very dens of Masonic secret societies, camouflaged in alchemical treatises full of paranoia. Take the compass rose as an example. For centuries, crude sailors treated it like a lifebuoy to avoid drowning at sea. But for those who understand, it is a form of sacred geometry. Its sharp angles don't just point to the directions of this muddy earth, no. Its celestial alignment hammers an invisible arrow straight toward the south. It points to a kingdom of absolute purity, where frost rules and time is never broken. Through this lens, the Knights Templar weren't just a few mercenaries or chanting monks. They were the gatekeepers, managers of a polar axis, where the divine treads upon the earthly. The most ironic thing, do you know what it is? It's the Enlightenment. That era where people beat their chests, claiming to have used reason to dispel demons and myths. But what is the truth? The more they tried to use science to explain, the more they craved the magic they had just rejected. The fascination only grew. The greatest minds, like Francis Bacon or Athanasius Kircher, muttered about lost continents, about primal wisdom sleeping in the permafrost. The Rosicrucians, the Freemasons, well, the venerable gentlemen of these secret societies began to whisper to each other about a primordial homeland of humanity, an Eden not rotted by greed, hidden at the far end of the South. And guess whose lineage they claimed as their own? The Knights Templar. They implicitly asserted, what the Knights saw, they encoded, and they hid it away. By the 19th century, Antarctica was still a giant question mark on the world map. But alas, sailors had stories to tell over clinking glasses of rum. They told of icebergs shaped like fortresses, of ancient carved stone blocks stuck in ice for 1,000 years, and of ghostly blind spots where the compass spun wildly, making their skin crawl with the belief they had just stepped into a dimension beyond all physical laws. You'll say those are fevered dreams of men with scurvy who have been at sea too long, right? Sure, that's how people turn a blind eye. A Templar mark found on an anchor stone at an uninhabited sub-Antarctic island? Throw it away, a joke of nature, unless you actually know what you were looking for. And then, welcome to the 20th century, an era of killing machines, of technological progress, and, of course, of hypocrisy. Nations signed treaties, declaring Antarctica a land of peace and science, banning all military ambitions. How noble. But look at the darkness behind that curtain. Why are countless vast areas cordoned off without explanation? Why are satellite photos over Antarctica accidentally blurred with such intent? Why did countless expeditions from superpowers not just bring geologists or biologists, but secretly stuff the ranks with archivists, decoders, and even religious observers? Why do you send an ancient script decoder to an uninhabited land? To read the language of penguins? No. Clearly, whatever is lying beneath that ice shell is not just geology. It is history. The rumors became even crazier after World War II. Allied intelligence sweated when they heard whispers of top-secret Nazi expeditions to an area they named Neuschwabenland in Antarctica. Were they seeking territory? Or had they sniffed out something beyond mere geographic boundaries? Right after the war, the Americans responded with Operation High Jump, a terrifyingly large naval landing led by Admiral Byrd. The pretext was scientific research, but Byrd's own cryptic, bone-chilling comments about flying machines that could move from one pole to the other at incredible speeds threw a torch into the myth system. In the eyes of those seeking the brutal truth, Antarctica is no longer the planet's giant refrigerator. It is an inverted axis, where north becomes south, where light is bent according to a different law, where time freezes, feeling as if every clock needle has stalled. They whisper about something called the Polar Library, a supreme archive buried under miles of ice, holding the true memory of human civilization, locked tight by those who foresaw the rise and bloody fall of the northern empires. It is called the White Cenotaph, a tomb without a body, but containing knowledge. We return to the core idea. It was never about conquest, nor about greed for gold and silver. It was about preservation. When faced with extinction, the Knights Templar chose to hide their legacy, not in crowded Europe, but in a place where no earthly hand could touch for centuries. Their greatest value lies not in what they shouted at history, but in what they chose never to say. A map was never intended for anyone to find. It was drawn only to be remembered. In a world gone mad for data, where people know even when you go to the bathroom, sometimes it is the things that don't exist that scream the loudest. Antarctica, with its bone-chilling white silence and military no-fly zones, stands like a final fortress, spitting in the face of the digital age's prying eyes. Satellite images are blurred. Scientific outposts hide in a watchful stillness, yet beneath that ice, the whispers of the Knights Templar are being reborn. Language can be burned, books can rot, but symbols slide through time like water snaking through cracks in massive boulders. The Knights Templar were world-weary men. They were born of blood and faith, then incinerated by the hellfire of greed. They understood one truth perfectly. When the tongue is cut, silence speaks. In the eyes of the mundane, these are just decorations. But for those hunting the remnants of cursed orders, this isn't art. They are coordinates. They are ghostly footprints. They are bloody warnings. Look at the compass rose, the kind sketched on medieval Catalan maps, 8-pointed stars nested in circles, sandwiched between red crosses. When you overlay these sacred geometric designs onto a modern globe, guess where the southern vectors point? Straight into the heart of Antarctica. That isn't the impulsive doodle of a drunkard. Those are prayers made of geometry. And then the rose, sub rosa, the ancient Latin term meaning under the rose, signifying absolute secrecy. Templar seals didn't just feature warriors. They had roses entwined with venomous snakes, or roses blanketing dark arches. The message here is subtle but razor sharp. Silence and the greatest secrets always bloom together. And don't forget the number 9, the 9 original founders. 9 steps in the gruesome initiation ritual. 9 pointed stars carved heavily onto faded tombstones. For the occultist, the 9th path isn't just about north, south, east, or west. It is the path that stabs deep into the earth, going straight into the realm of profound mystery. Have you ever seen the gaps on the oldest Templar maps? Gaps surrounded by dragons and serpents, or ships sailing straight into the void. Academia calls it artistic imagination. How naive. To a medieval knight, a coiled snake at the edge of a map didn't mean beware of snakes. It meant this place belongs to the silence. Those were portals between earthly geography and the lands that cannot be named. In 1800, a stone slab was unearthed in Languedoc with a triangle nested in a circle, pierced by a perfectly straight line. The alchemical principle, as above, so below. Coincidentally, centuries later, a series of Antarctic exploration badges accidentally reused that exact motif. Then there are today's satellite images. When you overlay Templar mapping techniques onto photos of massive glacial rifts in Antarctica, they match millimeter for millimeter. Rational minds immediately scream pareidolia, the psychological phenomenon where the brain tricks itself. But for those digging for the truth, it is a giant question mark carved by God directly into the ice. They aren't looking toward the Holy East, my friends. Those corpse statues are looking south, looking toward the extreme frontier no one has touched, toward the place where the cold hides much more than frost. Underground legends even whisper of a top-secret map smuggled to the Azores, a map not meant to be read with the naked eye, but encoded with ink that only appears under a specific angle of candlelight. And on it, there is no continent at all, only a circle within a circle, a gateway. They say it wasn't drawn to show space. It is a map of the flow of time. Everything is inverted. Red crosses are turned upside down on relics, not as profanity, but as a flipped compass, pointing to a crown of the earth located in the south. Labyrinths carved into cathedral floors are not just spiritual symbols. They are blueprints for underground vaults. And when compared, they match morbidly well with the network of ice tunnels beneath Antarctica. Too similar to be called a ridiculous coincidence. And then the bomb drops. In 2016, a classified document from a defunct military satellite project was dumped onto the global network. It confirmed the existence of massive magnetic anomalies beneath the Antarctic crust. Polygonal structures, too symmetrical, too perfect to be created by nature. History suddenly shudders, remembering the ancient scrolls secretly smuggled out of Lisbon in 1314, remembering why the Nazi war machine frantically plowed through Antarctica in the 1930s. Their symbols don't scream. They use the gravity of silence to pull us into the vortex of truth. Not all maps are drawn with ink, and the greatest doors were never opened with a key. They are opened with memory. Have you ever looked closely at the insignia on a soldier's shoulder? Especially those sent to the end of the world. The polar research stations, take a look. Behind the boring anchor or snowflake symbols, occasionally you'll catch it. A brilliant red cross or a star nestled neatly inside a perfect circle. Don't yawn just yet. If you're a detective used to digging through the dark corners of history like me, Zorro, you'll feel a chill down your spine. That isn't merely graphic design. Those are motifs suspiciously close to the seals of the Knights Templar. When cornered with questions, authorities usually shrug and tear off an industrial smile. "Oh, sir, that's just geometric minimalism," or "it stems from maritime tradition." Sounds plausible, but for some, it isn't an accident. It is a silent bow, a covert tribute to those who arrived there centuries ago. Take Project Crown as an example, a modern initiative reeking of government money disguised under the label of Ice Core drilling for climate research. Yet, leaked files whisper of unidentified artifacts pulled from the deep abyss. The name Crown itself wasn't chosen by chance. In Templar esoteric terminology, it refers to the hidden sovereignty beneath sacred geometry. It is an echo of the crown of the world, a conceptual treasure said to be sleeping in the frozen south. Do you think I'm paranoid? Then look at how pop culture is brainwashing us. From blockbuster games to Netflix series, the motif of secret societies protecting lost technology under the Antarctic ice is everywhere. Don't think it's just the rich imagination of Hollywood writers running out of ideas. No, my friends. It is a cultural urge. A collective psychological leak. We have a persistent, gnawing suspicion in our minds that something great has been hidden away. That the key to human history doesn't lie in the boring textbook pages we were forced to memorize, but in the things we forgot to question. And while mainstream academia shuts its eyes and ears, the digital excavators appear. They don't use shovels or picks. Their weapons are satellite data, ground-penetrating radar, and superior AI algorithms. These anonymous individuals painstakingly scan every pixel of polar terrain. And guess what they find? Anomalies. Not random snowdrifts, but perfect hexagonal rock ridges, massive buried dome structures, and elevations so symmetrical that Mother Nature would have to bow down in respect. When they cross-reference these images with medieval nautical maps and Freemason architectural diagrams, the match is spine-chilling. Naturally, the scientific elite jumps up to dismiss it, calling it pareidolia or satellite data errors. But the persistence of these cyber archaeologists has attracted unwanted eyes. A few researchers, immediately after publishing their sharpest findings on dark forums, have evaporated, vanished without a trace. No goodbye, no police files resolved. Just accounts that were lit and then extinguished forever. Suppression? Or did they dig too deep into a layer of ice that wasn't meant to be touched? The more it is suppressed, the more the fire of curiosity burns. Petitions demanding the declassification of high-resolution satellite imagery of Antarctica are gathering hundreds of thousands of signatures. Our premise is simple, brutal, but incredibly logical. If there is anything created by humans or ancient civilizations beneath that ice, it belongs to humanity. It is our legacy, not the private toy of a few corporations or boastful governments. Out of that discontent, new secret societies have been born right in cyberspace. One calls itself the Ninth Path. Don't search for them on Google. You'll only find trash. Their base lies deep in the dark web, appearing and disappearing in flashes. They use ciphers, sacred geometry, and open-source code to simulate ancient rituals. They don't crave political power. What they want is revelation. This organization claims to be reconstructing a lost ancient manuscript of the Knights Templar. Their symbol? A blood-red labyrinth locked tight within polar coordinates. So what is the forbidden map, really? Perhaps our biggest mistake is constantly looking for a yellowed piece of sheepskin. At a closed-door private seminar in Prague in 2021, a presentation made the attendees break out in a cold sweat. Slides that were never leaked to the public displayed 3D elevation models of subglacial basins in Antarctica. And when they applied the geometric grid from the Knights Templar seal onto it, the perfection. was breathtaking. The final photo was titled "The Cross Beneath the Crown," revealing 4 massive underground mountain ranges converging at a deep, invisible fifth point. A random coincidence? Did Earth naturally create a giant seal in Antarctica? Or did 12th century minds somehow encode the spatial structure of a continent before mankind even knew the concept of ultrasonic waves? Keep those questions in your mind because, my friends, we have only just touched the blade to the surface of this iceberg. Have you ever wondered what intelligence agents do with their spare time? Don't think they only focus on nuclear threats or cyber terrorism. There are rumors in well-informed circles that top intelligence agencies are pricking up their ears at Antarctic legends. Why? Not because those men in black suits suddenly believe in Templar fairy tales, but because they understand a deadly truth. Belief shapes reality. If you can make a large enough crowd believe there is something ancient, a dark power, or forbidden technology sleeping under the permafrost, then that belief itself becomes a weapon. A geopolitical force that needs to be monitored, manipulated, and when necessary used to lead the masses like a flock of sheep. A few years ago, an anonymous post on a military-grade encrypted forum dropped a bomb on the online community. The leaker claimed to have broken into the catalog of a permanently sealed archive inside the Vatican. Its content? A text speaking of the map that must not be followed, and a continent that no mouth is permitted to name. Make no mistake, this wasn't a cheap piece of fiction. The post described in haunting detail a set of rituals tied to the winter solstice. Imagine this setting: a dark vault, a blood-red stone placed in the center of the room, a mirrored bowl reflecting cold light, and forbidden phrases whispered through teeth in Old Occitan. The language of the heretics who were burned alive? Was it an elaborate prank by a bored hacker, or a bleeding fragment of a liturgy that the church swept under the rug of history? We don't know, but it spread like wildfire. In an insanely noisy world where information has a lifespan measured in seconds and silence is a luxury, Antarctica stands as the planet's final quiet tomb. And because it is silent, the echoes are even more deafening. We roar with drones, LiDAR, and sonar to plow through that stark white surface. Are we standing at the threshold of a great revelation? Or are we, Zorro and you all, just a swarm of blind moths, frantically charging into the light of ancient symbols, never truly tasting the heat of the fire? Do this with me. Close your eyes. Stop scrolling on your phone. Visualize that ice. Look deep down. It isn't a meaningless void. It is layers upon layers of frozen meaning. The lines crisscrossing down there are not natural cracks. Those massive circles are not craters from meteors. What if the map of Antarctica was never forbidden because of the lands it drew, but because of what it reveals about us, about humanity? That humans were once greater, once knew more, remembered more clearly. And then, out of some ultimate fear, we cowardly chose to forget. The Knights Templar may have turned to ash long ago, their bones chewed up by time, but their silence is screaming in our faces. Perhaps it isn't the Antarctic ice that hides the truth, but the chaotic, cheap noise of our era that has buried it with its own hands. What the hell do we really know about our origins? Or are we just using dark shadows to gloss over our ignorance? The more frantically you dig into the connection between the Knights and the Antarctic map, the more you slam into a wall of silence. But please, listen closely. This isn't the silence of nothing to say. It is the silence of those who have been erased. Dozens of documents burned by accident. King's letters with the most important pages torn out. Wax seals that once bore familiar symbols now scraped so smooth they are unreadable. These are not harmless gaps in history. Don't be so naive. They are gaps tailored by cunning minds. Take the Portolano map as an example. A Majorcan cartographer sketched it in 1351. On that map, a massive southern landmass is intricately carved, with a cross reigning over a circle, an unmistakable signature. But guess what? The original has vanished into thin air. What we have today are only replicas and a few scattered descriptions from people who claim to have seen it. And the funny thing is, the testimonies clash. Some swear it was written in Latin. Others insist it was Greek. A third group mumbles that there wasn't a single damn word on it, just terrifying geometric shapes. Which account is true? Or was this entire circus cleverly staged to throw us into a maze of confusion? This is when the trail starts to smell of blood. Remember the Vatican archives? Endless shelves holding secrets that humanity is not permitted to see. Scholars have shivered at finding the phrase terra amissis, the lost land, scribbled by hand in the margins of ancient theological treatises. But when they demanded to see the original, the door immediately slammed shut. Sealed. Top secret. What if terra amissis wasn't the fertile Garden of Eden from the Bible, but somewhere further south, cold, deadly, and condemned to oblivion for reasons that directly threaten the throne of God? When researchers tried to track down the identity of the monk who left that sloppy note, his file abruptly closed in 1742. No obituary date, no burial record in any cemetery. He was simply erased from existence. Even the trial records of the Knights Templar, the thing the church meticulously copied over and over to shame them, are full of crude gaps. The yellow diary of an Inquisition investigator recorded the bloody testimony of a tortured knight. The knight whispered of a southern catacomb and a breathless throne. You're holding your breath for the next part, aren't you? Forget it. The page stops right there. The jagged edge of the paper shows it was violently torn out. Did the scribe tear it out in panic? Or did someone more powerful excise it later? We will never know. What is left in our hands is only the sigh of a great truth, reaching out but unable to touch. And then, how do we explain the slaps in the face of official history? In 1513, Admiral Piri Reis drew his infamous map by patching it together from ancient sources that he insisted on taking to his grave. The fatal point is, parts of the Piri Reis map detail the mountain ranges deep beneath the Antarctic ice. Wait, it wasn't until the mid-20th century that humans used ground-penetrating radar to confirm the existence of those mountains, right? Was it a crazy stroke of luck? A genius ahead of his time? Or did Reis, in some devilish way, get his hands on the treasure of knowledge that the Knights Templar brought to the West when fleeing the Pope's sword? What libraries did they loot in the east? What parchment scrolls were stuffed by them into thick stone walls and dark catacombs, now crumbled to ash? The deeper you dig, the more you see the shape of a hairy hand. Those absurd gaps feel like they were orchestrated with brutal, systematic cruelty. Look at Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland, a tightly sealed vault where the stone floor is carved with concentric patterns that match millimeter for millimeter with today's polar satellite scans. A dusty, ancient manuscript in a French monastery consistently has a page torn out every 10 pages. A gruesome inventory of assets in the Aragon region of Spain lists chests sealed with wax and maps not permitted to be looked at under firelight. Who? I ask you, what devilish person painstakingly wrote those things, and what brutal force went out with a sword to ensure they all vanished from this world? By now, you must be starting to wonder, just as I have stayed awake countless nights, that it isn't just about what was lost, but who the hell sat in the dark and decided it must disappear? Is time a blind executioner cutting down every truth? Or is there a razor-sharp intent behind it? Imagine a shadowy council, a silent nod, a final torch timidly passed before the ultimate map is shoved into a sealed wall cavity, or thrown into a fire in a ruined chapel whose cause will forever be buried in forged reports. The silence suffocating Antarctica isn't just physical. It's not just the absence of sound in a desert of ice and snow. That silence reeks of politics. It reeks of censorship. It reeks of ancestral blood. In any miserable era of humanity, there are always those who crown themselves the gatekeepers with swords, ready to behead anyone carrying heretical thoughts. But Zorro asks you, what if heresy wasn't a crime, but simply the first spark of memory? Memory of a truth too massive, too offensive to the eyes, something that, if confirmed, would shatter not just geography textbooks, but theology, history, and even crush the arrogant ego we still hallucinate about ourselves. What the hell are we supposed to do with an absence when it has the shape of a secret monster? What if that forbidden map never meant the land it drew, but what it implied? It implied that there were those who came before us, that the holy orders in blood-stained white cloaks knew too much, and that silence, in the end, is the most brutal shackle of control. But those cover-up efforts sometimes bleed, and when they bleed, we have unexplained deaths. Turn back the clock to the early 1800s. A Jesuit scholar named Father Esteban Salazar tremblingly announced that he had just finished translating a fragment from an ancient Knights Templar manuscript, something originally thought to have been burned and being kept in a damp catacomb in Lisbon. According to Salazar's panicked notes, that piece of sheepskin whispered a savage sentence. The crown of ice guards the seal. When fire meets cold, those who sleep will stir. Guess what happened next? Salazar never managed to publish a single word. He evaporated during an unauthorized, unlicensed expedition, plunging straight into the Southern Ocean. His ship, the Herminius, lies forever at the bottom of the deep sea. Not a single plank, not a single bone washed ashore. Did the sea swallow him whole, or did someone give the order to sink it to ensure those who sleep are never awakened. Even more bizarre, pack your bag and come with me to look at the symbols scattered around the world. How on earth do you explain geometric shapes carved deep into the cliffs of Patagonia, at the very end of South America, being perfect mirror copies of Templar patterns carved on a sword hilt unearthed in Normandy, France? Migration? The coincidence of parallel minds? Or did an invisible network of knowledge once exist, spitting in the face of the silly linear timeline academia preaches? Every question the elite refuse to answer births 10 other monsters of doubt. Why do ancient globes, thick with the dust of time, draw the South Pole in detail with winding coastlines that our modern satellites have only recently struggled to rediscover? Why did a brilliant genius like Leonardo da Vinci painstakingly sketch a mysterious spiral piercing the southern hemisphere without leaving any explanation? And the peak of absurdity, why must that barren Antarctic land be subject to extreme restrictive treaties, banning humans from visiting freely under the hypocritical label of global research cooperation? You see, the truth might be lying out there, shattered into 1,000 sharp pieces, scattered across space and time, patiently waiting for crazy people like you and me to pick them up. What if history isn't a straight line, but a spiral, draining life force? What if the act humanity beats its chest calling discovery is actually just the process of remembering a brutally forbidden legacy? Close your eyes and imagine the moment the last fleet of the Knights Templar tore through the waves fleeing Europe, sinking slowly into the gloomy horizon. What did they carry in those creaky holds? Gold, silver jewels, fabricated holy grails? Maybe. But I bet you the heaviest, most valuable thing they carried was a legacy built with blood. Encoded knowledge. Rituals that were never written on paper to avoid being burned, but passed from one breath to another, honed through time. And when they vanished from the stage of history, that knowledge became a time bomb, a memory too dangerous for mankind to dare name. We often cry over lost civilizations, treating them as victims of natural erosion. But my friend, what if they were buried with calculation? The first time by the enemy's sword, and the second time by their own protectors. What if memory itself was turned into a fortress not built of bricks and stones to be knocked down by cannons, but built of silence? The Knights Templar, amidst the surrounding fire and base betrayal, chose to leave a legacy too sacred to risk throwing into the hands of the unworthy. They chose silence, not because they were afraid, but because silence in a mad world is the most brutal and solid defense. That forbidden knowledge went into the ground. It snaked into stone arches, wove itself into architecture, into the bizarre orientation of ancient cathedrals that always point straight toward the southern constellations. Constellations that no longer appear in the European sky. Those were not architectural accidents. That is a living legacy. A sentence brutally cut off by someone lying still beneath the ice and cold stone slabs, patiently waiting for someone crazy enough, sane enough, and hungry enough to finish reading it. That person, could it be us? Listen to me. The memory we are tracking, this silence carved in massive stone, it isn't passive. Don't think of it as a rotting corpse waiting for someone to pick its bones. It is lurking. It is strategic. It is patiently beckoning. Those sober enough to press their ear to that stillness will realize they are being pulled down a rabbit hole, a path that doesn't lead to sugar-coated, cookie-cutter answers, but leads straight to razor-sharp questions. What if we humans are not the unlucky ones cleaning up the trash of a shattered past? What if we are actually the managers of a great, unfinished work? What if the Knights Templar never wanted us to laboriously rebuild their temples, but what they needed was simply, we must remember. When you understand that, silence suddenly turns into a brutal weapon. In a modern world, constantly screaming for instant explanations, the refusal to speak is an ultimate act of resistance. Holding back the truth, hiding it away, that is absolute power. The Knights Templar, fanatical warriors, crafty mystics, skilled builders, they understood this truth to their very marrow. Their evaporation from history wasn't a cowardly flight. It was a perfect blueprint. Not every revelation is wrapped in a gift box with a red bow. Some things you must win with blood, with a madness-inducing contemplation, through years of questioning, hitting dead ends, and questioning again. Fire is always the brutal twin of silence. Where fire licks and swallows everything into ash, silence cools things down for eternal preservation. The archives burning fiercely in Limoges, the massive ships snapping and sinking under a southern sky writhing with storms, the screams stifled in the torture chambers of the Inquisition. Yet, something stubbornly survives. It flows in the veins of stonemasons who still smile while hiding an 8-pointed star in the corner of a modern chapel. It lies in the trembling fingers of the one flipping through ancient maps and freezing at coastlines that have no name on any GPS app. It lies in the very staggered breaths between words. Right now, as I, Zorro, lower my voice, can you feel it? That shiver down your spine? The invisible weight pressing on your chest? That thin thread stretches far beyond moth-eaten records, further than blood-soaked dry bones. It stretches into a silence older than paper and ink, older than humanity's first altar. It isn't a meaningless void. It is a prison of echoes. You will realize an ironic truth. The greatest memory is never kept in locked vaults. It lives precariously in your choices, in the way your gaze is hypnotized for too long by an ancient carving you don't understand, in the way your dreams occasionally throw you into the middle of white wildernesses where massive geometric shapes are floating. I'll say it straight. The forbidden map was never a yellowed piece of sheepskin or a wrinkled paper. It is a lens, a way of seeing the world passed from one madman to another, encoded not with stupid latitude and longitude coordinates, but with silent reverence. As you sit there late at night, eyes glued to the screen and swallowing every word of this story, you aren't just listening to history. Congratulations, you have officially been pulled into that legacy. You have just become a gear in a massive machine aimed at keeping this memory from rotting. That was the final gamble the Knights Templar placed, that centuries later, a seeker would appear. That seeker doesn't carry a bloody sword or a cluster of rusty keys, but carries a head full of stillness. Because only stillness can strip away what the noise of this world is trying to hide. Fire can burn 10,000 maps, but it cannot burn an idea. Every effort at suppression can stifle screams, but it cannot erase the truth those bodies carry. The legacy doesn't lie in lifeless monuments or trashy online news headlines. Ask yourself, is there any other story that dares to stubbornly refuse death like this? Not by being fattened by academies, but by those who crave to wander in the darkness. It lives in the quiet hours right now. The forbidden map, the bone-chilling whisper of Antarctica, the invisible legacy of the Knights Templar. They don't form a dull loop. They are a spiral sucking you down deeper, and a spiral has no bottom. If you have followed me this far, perhaps you have started to realize this game was never about secret voyages or buried continents. This game is about you, your position in the food chain of those seeking the truth. The world has forgotten how to open its eyes and look. So, when the darkness closes in on the room, ask yourself with a surge of ultimate wonder, what kind of seed are you carrying inside you that you yourself don't even know? The Knights Templar have had their names erased, but their function isn't dead. They have evolved. They turned into a frequency, a ghostly resonance that can only be heard in abandoned spaces, in mist, and in the blinding white stillness of the ice. Imagine a map that only appears under the cold moonlight, drawn not with ink, but with sacred geometric lines woven into your cerebral cortex. It doesn't lead you to a vault full of gold. It slaps you in the face with a clashing realization. You are no longer a spectator. Now, you are the whisper. This is the final breath of this story. And honestly, I don't have time to beg you to believe it. I want you to doubt. I want you to be haunted. Every time you accidentally stare at a strange pattern on an old building, or feel a bone-chilling wind from the south glide past your neck, remember that maps sometimes lead not to a place, but to a state of mind. Antarctica might be the planet's final silent tomb, not because no one there is speaking, but because humanity has gone deaf. The final gift of the Knights Templar wasn't treasure hidden under the ice. Their gift is fine-tuning. They have fine-tuned the brains of those who came after, through the centuries, to recognize the invisible. And that is where you are standing right now. You are connecting with that frequency. You have been fine-tuned. Antarctica isn't just wind and ice. That pulse is still echoing. And you, my friend, are the final archive. The whisper has been passed on. Now, what are you going to do with it?